Greetings, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. Here I am in Hampton Court Palace, coming into Henry VIII's apartments, just up these stairs. Keep you safe from flooding. You see, that's the idea because we're so close to the Thames. It used to burst its banks very regularly. And here, Catherine of Aragon, his faithful wife, whom he jilted and claimed had been his mistress, really. She was mortally offended. A very sincerely religious woman. She thought that was a height of immorality to climb into a man, not a husband, into bed with a man, not a husband. Although she admitted she'd done that with Arthur. Right, okay. Well, welcome to Henry VIII's palace.
In 1533, Henry married a triumphant Anne.
Anyway, it's enormous. I've raced through it and scarcely scratched the surface. You could spend all day here.
Many still regarded Catherine as the true mother.
So that's out into the front
To
courtyard.
Henry's bitter disappointment,
I'll make it
she
darker.
gave birth not to the son she had promised, but to a daughter, Princess
Does that
Elizabeth.
make it easier?
Henry's passion for her soon cooled. The king pursued other men, including Anne's lady-in-waiting, Jane Seymour. Anne's old allies deserted her, and she was sent to the Tower accused of adultery with 5 men.
You should watch The Other Boleyn Girl, starring who is it, Scarlett Johansson, and that American-Israeli actress, I forget her name, Natalie Portman. Both absolutely ravishing. But the thing is, it tends to lend credence to Henry VIII's accusation that Anne Boleyn had an affair with her brother. But most historians don't believe that. Indeed, the American Bar Association about 20 years ago held their annual conference in London, and they decided, I suppose out of a historical curiosity, to hold a trial of Anne Boleyn. And based on the modern rules of evidence and so forth, would she have been convicted? And they concluded no, she should have been acquitted, because it was all just hearsay. Obviously, in trials in those days were not fair as we would consider them. You weren't always even allowed to be present in your own trial. Sometimes you were permitted to be present, but not to say anything in your defense. And there were other things, sometimes just accusations, evidence for the prosecution read out, and none for the defense. Fair trials as we know them really only dated from the early 20th century. So anyway, look at this enormous dining hall. Look at the tapestries around here. How ornate they are. You could spend a whole day admiring this place. So a raised area for the king to dine at. And that Orientalist child is there. This is the Great Hall, as in where he would hold audiences, receive important dignitaries as visitors. So I'll darken it a bit, and there you can see the red cardinal's hat, all sorts of coats of arms here. Is there a Y for York on one of them? So this was a Rapet study for a very long time. And look on these tapestries here, they're a bit faded. I wish they'd rework them. They've got Latin captions written at the bottom. And look at all these antlers up there. So he was very fond of hunting, Henry VIII. Hyde Park, St. James's Park, Green Park. These really were royal parks for hunting, as indeed was Richmond Park, Bushy Park, hard by. So they liked to dine on venisons. They ate a huge quantity of meat. Most were very poor and could rarely eat meat. And remember, like the New Forest created by William the Conqueror in the late 11th century. It was new in the 11th century, clearing out several villages to make room for his sport. Anyway, and people could be blinded or indeed castrated for poaching one of the king's deer. Okay, let me see. And then a scene from the Bible here, and look, God up there in the clouds. So anyway, it's enormously impressive. The grandeur of the place is really staggering. And look at this for a hammer beam roof. How about that? I better make it brighter so you can see what I'm talking about. Anyway, make it a bit brighter again. Magnificent, I think you'll agree. So that's obviously the king's dining place. So you have to come up to see the king, and that gallery up there could have an orchestra or indeed a choir regaling you as you dine. There's just so many more deer's antlers. There were a lot more of them in the old days. But quite dangerous. People got killed hunting them. One of William the Conqueror's sons was killed by a stag. Anyway, look at those. They're called doubloons, those trousers. That guy needs to lose weight, a real fat ass, I think you'll agree. Not that I'm anyone to talk. want to come to Henry VIII's private apartments. Look who this is, man in red. We don't know who that's supposed to be. The sort of hat they used to like with a feather. Look at the tights, like to have a well-turned ankle. Henry VIII often liked to turn it slightly, show his calf, doing that into the 18th century. Quite a good-looking youth, but a hideous man later on. Look, there they are going to be stoning the Pope, my goodness. Oh. Look at that, the Habsburg chin, a mutant inbred. So don't do your cousin, however strong the temptation. All right, Francis I of France, Henry VIII's contemporary in France, whom we fought against and later met at the Battle of the, well, not the battle, sorry, the sort of conference, as it were, the field of the cloth of gold, which was monstrously expensive. He was trying to keep up with the Joneses, driving people to absolute poverty, wrecking the country. You know, his father had been very good at managing the exchequer, often mocked for his parsimony, but actually, you know, he was sensible. Henry VII, no disasters under Henry VII. And so he left loads of money in the coffers, but Henry VIII emptied it, had the amicable grant, was anything but amicable, a forced loan. Loads of rebellions against him before this excessive taxation to fund these unwinnable wars against France. There's Arthur, Henry VIII's elder brother, Prince of Wales, the one who first of all married Catherine of Aragon and died at the age of 15. Catherine of Aragon being a few months older than Arthur. So Henry VIII was supposedly destined for the priesthood. He was the spare, ended up being the heir. Oh, Henry VIII's mother, Elizabeth of York, wed at the age of 18. Catherine Parr, okay, his last wife, who survived him, and then she married the man she actually loved. Can't remember the bloke's name actually, but then he died only a couple of years later. Okay, so Henry VIII and his children. It's debatable which ones were born in a proper marriage and which ones weren't. And that's Edward VI, who took over after him, his only legitimate son, who died at the age of 15. He'd caught, tuberculosis. He died in July 1558, and his cousin briefly took over. Look at that. Some suitably regal music. Anyway, it is mind-blowing, I think you'll agree. The opulence of the place, the scale of the place, this wooden paneling. Look at that handiwork. They don't make it like this anymore. So you could spend all day here. I'm really not doing it justice. You'd want to stop and admire these many splendid oil paintings. So the aesthetics of the place are fabulous. And one of the things which is so exceptionally pleasing about it is that they haven't overloaded it. There's enough blank space around it. Sometimes there are just too many artworks to appreciate, but these things stand out when there are not too many of them. And you think how disgustingly inegalitarian the place was when Henry VIII had 50 castles or palaces, and most people were living in ghastly hovels, the standard of a garden shed, dying of exposure, of pneumonia, suffering rheumatism and arthritis quite avoidably, were teetering on the brink of starvation half the time, when malnourished children could be hanged for stealing food, and were. And when I say hanged, it was a slow drop, left to strangle over 20 minutes. So it was a really sick society. Not that the most other societies were better, but this is the staggering thing, how a society could be highly sophisticated and civilized, and yet unutterably barbaric at the same time, like this country in the 18th century, one of the most scientifically advanced at the time, very elegant in some regards, but also absolutely appalling, visiting the most unspeakable atrocities on the people of West Africa, being satanically cruel and completely impenitent, indeed proud of it, boasting of it. Look at all these, wow, scenes from the Bible. So I could talk so much about each one of these, but simply didn't have the time. So come and visit yourself. I think you'll agree. You've got to do that. Wow, and even look at the pillars they built. Then look at these sort of fake wooden pillars, and look at the work at the top. That handiwork and the attention to detail is astonishing. Right, I think I'll switch it off now.